Republican California Congressman Devin Nunes. He is chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. And Mr. Chairman, it is good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for joining us.
Great to be here again.
Well, now Brett Kavanaugh will start his new job pretty soon, next week, on the Supreme Court. Your reaction to what has taken place this weekend?
Well, I'll tell you, it really shows the divide between what you have in Washington, D.C. and New York City and that whole beltway and all the big cities in America who have been buying into this mob-like mentality of opposing a Supreme Court justice nominee for apparently no reason. In contrast, Maria, I've been out here in the rural part of California in my district for the last week, and I cannot go anywhere, to any coffee shop, any grocery store, anywhere, without somebody bringing up Judge Kavanaugh and how upset they are, not only by what they're doing to him and his family, but also by the behavior of politicians. And it looks like total chaos in Washington, D.C., when really the opposite is true. We've never had it so good in this country.
Well, you know, when you look at the outcomes that the president has had, they've been very positive, from economic to obviously the judge namings, judicials, as well as obviously the Supreme Court. But it's interesting to see the hate coming from the left. I mean, Susan Collins voted, obviously very important to get her vote to confirm Kavanaugh. She's been flooded with abusive tweets, threatening death, violence. To Susan Collins. We see the protesters continuing. Where do things go from here, Congressman, given the level of hate and upset on the left and the shaming tactics?
Well, I think this is what you've been seeing for the last 2 years. It's been done to the President of the United States. You've got a bunch of billionaires working with the fake news media and the Democratic Party to bring up hoaxes, fake news stories. They rile up their base, and now you have a whole bunch of Americans out there, you know, who believe things that just aren't true. So you couple that with what you've seen with all these crazy protests, and you know, when you actually ask, what are you protesting about? They can't answer the question, right? And you cover this every day on your show. The economy's doing well, the military's being rebuilt, trade agreements are getting done. Yet, what do you see, and what are they protesting? Nobody understands. That's why out in real America, people are like, what the heck is going on there? And that's why I say what you saw happen, really, I'll sum it down to this. You saw what's been happening to members of Congress, what's been happening to the president with sit-ins, die-ins, protests, blocking streets, you know, violence. You now saw that done to, number one, a federal judge, and now United States senators. And I think the American people have now woke up to the fact that this is not normal behavior for people to be doing in this country.
Yeah, and that's what we saw last week. We've got a couple of examples of it that we want to show, because this new strategy of getting in your face was really ramped up as the confirmation process took place last week. Watch this.
Why are you putting your hands on her? She's walking. I keep stepping on her feet.
Do you want the Republican Party to be the public party that is known for promoting rape and sexual assault?
Don't you wave your hand at me. I wave my hand at you.
When you grow up,
When I grow up, how dare you talk to women that way?
Don't put a liar on the court. Don't put a liar on the court. Don't put a liar on the court.
Not to mention the so-called doxing, where an intern for Sheila Jackson, Democrat Sheila Jackson, as well as Barbara Boxer, the intern was arrested last week for putting the personal information, addresses, phone numbers of Lindsey Graham, of Mike Lee, and Orrin Hatch on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're seeing, Maria. This is what's happening all over America. It's been happening to many of my colleagues, including myself, for a couple years. But can you imagine if, at the beginning of the Russia investigation, if myself or Trey Gowdy would have started asking questions of top DOJ officials, if we would have brought out the yearbook and started paging through their high school yearbooks and started asking them questions, okay?
Yeah.
2 years ago, a year and a half ago, we would have been laughed at, we would have been mocked, it would have been the biggest joke. And by the way, it should have been a joke.
So do you think
now
this has changed?
Now you have the normalization of this.
Do you think this has changed the dynamics going into the midterms, now 4 weeks away?
I do, because most Americans know it's absolutely ridiculous to have United States senators asking a federal judge about his yearbook entries.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. So
Yeah.
I hope that, you had tens of millions of people paying attention to this. So I think for the first time now, you actually have Republicans and independents who have woke up to the fact that they better get out and vote, or you're going to put these lunatics back in charge of this country.
Yeah, I want to switch gears and ask you about the other big news of the week, Congressman, and that is Jim Baker and what he said about in his testimony about this FBI investigation into the Trump-Russia collusion and that narrative, which we've spoken about so many times. So stay with us. Congressman Devin Nunes is with me. We'll get his thoughts on what Republicans are calling explosive developments this week in their investigation into the Justice Department and the 2016 election. That's next. Welcome back. House Republicans are expected to hold a closed-door interview with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein this upcoming week. This follows new revelations in the congressional probe into the Department of Justice's handling of the investigation into the 2016 Trump campaign. Last week, former top FBI official James Baker reportedly told investigators there was another source feeding information to the FBI before the agency launched a probe of the Trump campaign. Republicans are calling it a bombshell.
Some of the things that were shared were explosive in nature. I mean, I couldn't believe that I was hearing some of the testimony that here in the United States that the DOJ and FBI were involved with.
During the time prior to the election, there was another source giving information directly to the FBI, which we found the source to be pretty explosive.
And this additional source, he's being identified as Michael Sussman, a former DOJ prosecutor with links to the Democratic National Committee. Sources say he reached out to the FBI to provide documents on Russian hacking. I'm back now with House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes. And Mr. Chairman, connect the dots for us to tell us why this is important here. We know that you've been investigating the origin of this investigation that took place into Trump and Russia collusion, which, of course, was never existent. So tell us why this James Baker news is important.
Well, it's very simple. James Baker was the top lawyer at the FBI, reported directly to James Comey. Numerous officials at the DOJ and the FBI have told us under oath that the FBI, nobody at FBI or DOJ knew anything about the Democratic Party being behind the Clinton dirt. Well, now you have one of the top lawyers for the Democrats and the Clinton campaign who was feeding information directly to the top lawyer at the FBI before even the FISA warrant. So now you have absolute proof that that wasn't told to the FISA court. So you want your evidence of FISA abuse? There it is right there. A secret warrant was placed on an American citizen during a political campaign, and yet the FBI did not tell the court that they were getting this information directly from the opponent of that campaign. And this is really bad stuff. It's very simple. I mean, you just had it's not complicated. People should know it's probably not appropriate for a top lawyer of the Democratic Party to take dirt and give it to the top lawyer at the FBI.
And once again, they did not tell the FISA judge when they were looking to get that FISA warrant to wiretap Carter Page because he was on the Trump campaign. They did not tell the FISA judge that the information was coming from the DNC.
That is correct. And not only that, you also have that many officials have told us numerous times that they had no idea where it's coming from. And don't forget, you had originally the story from FBI and DOJ was that Republicans had started this information and given this information, and that has been totally blown out of the water. Republicans had nothing to do with it, and the top levels of the FBI absolutely knew this, right? I mean, you can't possibly argue that the top lawyer for the FBI meets with the top lawyer for the Democratic Party and just doesn't tell anyone. And so then you fast forward 4 months later. 4 months later, when they come and present the information to Congress, they say, well, we believe that Republicans were behind this. No, Republicans were never behind it. You knew the whole time who was behind it, the Democrats were, and it was so explosive and so damaging that that's why they didn't want us to know. And this is why the President of the United States has got to declassify the information we've been asking for. If he doesn't declassify it, he's going to let these criminals, this criminal activity and fraudulent behavior, people are going to get away with it if this information is not declassified so that all the American people
well,
can
you're
see.
4 weeks away from the midterm elections. Is he going to declassify before the midterm elections? I mean, this seems to be a critical piece of information that the American people need to know.
Well, look, he ordered it done. He ordered it done 3 weeks ago. He said he was ordering immediately with no redactions. And then what happened? A few days later, you had Rod Rosenstein convene all the top people, okay, the same people that are involved in signed the FISA, that have been blocking Congress from getting information. They all met with the president and told the president we can't do it because allies might get concerned. You can't buy any of this from these guys.
So you have a meeting, or Rod Rosenstein is going to be meeting with lawmakers next week. Tell us what you're expecting from this meeting from Rod Rosenstein next week. You already interviewed Andrew McCabe. Does what McCabe said jive with what Rosenstein has told you?
Well, this is going to be the real question, right? You had the he said, she said, one in the New York Times where McCabe's people said that definitely Rod Rosenstein was wanting to wear a wire to go in and secretly record the President of the United States so that they could use the 25th Amendment to remove him. I mean, that's a bombshell of a claim, right? If you really had the Deputy Attorney General who's in charge of the Russia investigation, who appointed the special counsel willing to go do that. Now, in the Washington Post, you kind of had well, I didn't really say that. It seems like it was coming from Rosenstein and the Department of Justice's people. I really didn't say that. I was just joking. Now, I don't believe that's a joke. I don't think it's something you would joke about.
Yeah.
You know, pretty serious stuff that you say, I'm going to wear a wire and go in and secretly record the President of the United States.
Yeah. Does Rod Rosenstein have a problem?
Well, I think it all comes down to whether or not he was willing to wear a wire or not. If he was willing to wear a wire and secretly record the president, Maria, it's someplace that this country's never been before. I don't know of any time in the history of this country where you had people who are at the top levels of government conspiring to secretly record a president so that you can trap the president into being able to go after the 25th Amendment to remove the president. That's serious stuff.
Yeah. So you're going to talk about that with Rosenstein next week. Anything else we should expect from this meeting when he heads to Capitol Hill?
Well, I think those are going to be the questions that have to be answered by Rosenstein. He needs to tell us really what he meant by this joke of willingness to wear a wire. And don't forget, this is a very important point. When Rosenstein appointed the special counsel, the lead investigators knew that there was no evidence of the Trump campaign colluding with the Russians. So what has the special counsel been doing this whole time? It really looks like it's pretty clear now that it is an investigation in search of a crime. Because the very thing the Trump campaign was investigated for, colluding with Russians, we now know that it was the Democratic Party colluding with Russians and feeding it to the top levels of the FBI, the general counsel of the FBI.
Wow. Wow. Have you spoken with Robert Mueller in any way? I mean, are you calling for Mueller's investigation to be shut down as a result of what you just said?
Well, I don't want the investigation to be shut down. What I want the investigation to do is determine who leaked the Flynn conversations, who leaked General Flynn's conversations. I want them to investigate that. I want them to investigate who was behind Fusion GPS. Who was Fusion GPS talking to? What Russians were they talking to? Who was Christopher Steele talking to? I want to know all the Russians that Fusion GPS interviewed, got information from, funneled into the Democrat Party, and then the Democratic Party funneled it to the FBI to open an investigation. That's what the Mueller investigation should be looking at.
Understood.
Because I don't know what the hell they were looking at this whole time.
Wow. Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much. We'll be watching a big week.
Always a pleasure.
Certainly. Devin Nunes joining us there.